doubted the statistics or doubted the accuracy of the statistics, but I still think it's fair to say that most small and medium-sized businesses are quite reluctant to invest in research and development. And instead of innovation, many of the companies still rely on subcontracting. But as we all know, labor prices are increasing, bigger added value is necessary. So universities at the same time are often seen as too elitist and perhaps impractical. We can all imagine a stereotypical image of a scientist who spends years in a laboratory working on issues that only he or she understands and that might never really bring a great impact to the economy. Now I'm wondering, is that merely a caricature, or did I just describe something that has a certain amount of truth in it? Mait, Rungi, you probably know better.
Thank you. I think that it's part of it is a cartoon, but in a big scale, it's still unfortunately true. I think that quite many companies, they actually, I would start even this way, that some companies, they are fun to do innovation, and some others perhaps don't, because they are quite satisfied with the current situation. They are good price, they do their subcontracting, their prices are very good, and they think that this kind of prosperity will last for them forever. And even if they do something, then they want to be more effective, and they put majority of their efforts to the process innovation. So they still do some innovation, but not in a product or service innovation, but a process innovation. But yeah, quite large part of the companies, they just don't do any innovation, and there are certain reasons, of course, because if we think about the innovation process, then we must realize that it's quite long-lasting. It's quite risky. For example, if we take pharmacy industry, then 1 out of the 10,000 compounds finally reaches to the market, and it's quite expensive. And the majority of the companies, especially right now during the corona, they just don't have enough funds to take that kind of activities in their companies. They just don't have funds for that. And taking this all together, it's risky, it takes a lot of money, and it's quite long-lasting. So that's from company's perspective. From university's perspective, I think that here we have to differentiate the two types of universities, especially at least here in Estonian landscape. We have here kind of traditional universities who do quite a lot of fundamental research, and then we have universities of applied sciences who are actually quite eager to do the applied research. They are quite eager and interested in to cooperate with the companies, to provide them their services, to do their research and development on behalf of companies, or at least to support them in this process. So, but to come back to the traditional universities, there the situation might be a little bit different, because they want to tie everything with research. They want to publish everything what they research. Then, publishing takes time. They are quite proud of the academic freedom to choose what do they research, when do they research, and that kind of issues. And it means that they might not be provide a quick response to the company's expectations and questions. that would be kind of short introduction. So partly it's right, but I think that this landscape is about to change, especially in the field of universities of applied sciences, who are more eager to do applied research.
Olga, I would like to hear your take on the best practices of cooperation between universities and companies in really fostering innovation going forward with research and development. Please convince me that what I described before about that scientist working in a laboratory was just a cartoon, that things are actually moving to a direction where those scientists will help us to take on the challenges of the modern day.
Oh, okay. I think the caricature is possibly quite accurate. However, the universities, as described in Estonia, are pretty much mirrored here in the UK. So we have a number of categories of universities, so Russell Group, plate glass, and applied universities. So the Russell Group and the plate glass tend to be more research focused and are exactly as described just now by my colleague there on the panel. They do applied research, but it tends to be in alliance with government. So in the UK, there are what's called KTPs, knowledge transfer partnerships, and all universities are able to apply for these with a partner company. So that's targeted research, if you like, targeted improvement, targeted innovation. It's a timed project, usually 2 years. It's one individual who tends to work full-time at the organisation, however small it is. So I've personally been involved with a couple of projects with regards to the circular economy. So one was a bike company in Wales, for instance. And the individual doing that is supervised by a full-time academic, which was my role on the KTP in Wales, for instance. And that would be half a day of a professor's time. The rest is full-time, and that person tends to end up either in a role in the organisation as well, or in the university because they want to complete that research project and make it a doctorate. So that's one way. We've then got universities such as the one where I used to work, which is Sheffield Hallam University. And that's one of the largest universities in England, and it's an applied university. It's what we call a post-92 university. So it got its university charter in 1992 or later. And the thing about post-1992 universities is they are, by and large, teaching universities. They are practical, they have links with industry, but with industry training boards. So accountancy, engineering, lots of kinds of, there are new degrees about apprenticeships to try and train people of different levels. Anyway, so these applied universities don't have a strong research tradition. But for the last 25 years in the UK, they've been funded as research universities. So we have this research excellence framework. And in the last couple of frameworks, which are every 4 or 5 years, the applied universities have tried very hard to become much more research focused. And playing on their strengths, which I think is very much relevant to Estonia, playing on their strengths is to embark on research projects that are useful and necessary probably to the environment, to the local hinterland, to their universities. And I think Sheffield's economy and the greater Sheffield area in South Yorkshire, for instance, is very similar to Estonia's economy. I mean, clearly much, much smaller. But the idea is that around Sheffield and its hinterland, the organisations are mainly small, medium enterprises. There are very few. I mean, 2 years ago, McLaren, the sports car people, they came, but it's an outpost. They're not headquartered there. So what the university has done, and I think this has been mirrored by other applied universities in England, and I think this could apply very well to Estonia, is when I was at Hallam, what we were trying to do was broaden our connectivity with with employers, with the local employers. So we wanted to help them with degree apprenticeships. So we set them up tailored, bespoke, that help build knowledge into the organisation whilst teaching various employees who wanted a career path in a small organisation. Sorry, I've got an itch. And that didn't have necessarily the large training possibilities that, say, the Accentures or the banks of this world have. So degree apprenticeships, combined research projects in an industry sector, be it law. There's an awful lot of work going on in AI in law, and there were a lot of large law firms in Sheffield, so we tried relationships with that, getting a conglomerate of businesses together to talk about how we as a university could help them, maybe improve their AI, maybe improve their processes, that kind of thing. So innovation, but on a practical side. We then had internships as well, and there were a couple of places, particularly, if you like, not micro, but employees with under 20 people really benefited from the internships, and actually more often than not hired the student. So we're beginning slowly to develop long-standing and deep relationships with the local employment body, and we found that then they would come to us. The more people we knew in an organisation, the more we would have just, I suppose, random conversations, and then curiosity is piqued by one thing that leads to another, and it's this coming together of ideas, not necessarily in a formal environment, but where all of a sudden people are not seeing universities as a separate part of the economy. It's what can we do together? And actually Sheffield City Council and Sheffield Region, which is an economic development region, worked very closely together. So there are energy and transport centres of thinking in Sheffield, which are fairly new, all as part of this new kind of thinking to what strengths can we build on. And obviously Sheffield had a very strong industrial past, and some of that, if you like, corporate memory or industrial memory remains, and it's able to be harnessed now in a way that not only thinks about the digitalised economy, but thinks about, where the future can be and where new pathways could be. And when you bring people from different fields together, it just triggers different thought patterns, I think, and different areas of connectivity, from which inevitably innovation grows, rather than the path of if you like, slow and steady evolution. Sometimes you just get this spark that comes from left field, and all of a sudden you've got a new idea that may take off and become massive, or may take off and eventually fade away. But 3 other things have come from that idea.
These are great ideas, Olga.
So Sheffield Hallam University has found this extraordinarily beneficial, this sort of broad approach, and yet targeted.
Wow,
Does
wonderful.
that answer your question?
Quite well. Emeke has already also posted a question through Slido, and she says from experience, I guess, very often targets and the pace of universities and enterprises are different, and they want to do it according according to their own rules, not to say price. So I think what she's referring to, that universities still live in a different kind of reality than enterprises. And there's also a question, what are your opinions about dual education? And let's start with Daisuke.
Yes. So the compared to the research, so it's absolutely different at the education. So the university provided two-sided, the research and the education side. So the previously the university provided based on the pure science, they provided such new technologies or some new the research outcome, and then to try to commercialize it. But it's very failed sometimes. So, but our university, the Kanazawa University, I belong to the School of the Innovation in Society. That side is absolutely the opposite side of the ideas. First of all, we try to find some challenge or the problems in societies, and then we set up such a the agenda, and then the backcasting to the university research's outcome, and to recombination of each variety of such the idea of some research's outcomes, and then to provide some solution to this the challenge of the problem. So such approach is much easier to create a new innovations, especially for the disruptive innovations. So the because the outside the previously the university is provided the sort of the supply side innovation. Yes, but in society they need some some solutions or some of the requirements. So if university can provide such a solution, adequate to the fit to each challenge of the problem, it's much easier and to mobilize and to realize the disruptive innovations. For example, previously the SMEs, especially the Japanese SMEs, asked to us. So okay, so now our machineries, it's we are going to the business, but we need much more productivity or efficiencies. So that's why the SMEs owners ask to our researchers, and what is solutions for the such how to improve such a system. But this is just the continuous innovations. We need apart from them, we need such destructive innovation. So that's why we try to find what is the problem so far, and then to back to the university side to provide a combination of each variety of the research outcome. Yeah, that is innovation. So that's why rather than the research the outcome, we try to focus on the education system. Now I already mentioned that, so that we provide such the entrepreneur restart of entrepreneur education programs. Based on this, that's our student dispatching another student. So they try to find such the challenge or the problem in the society, and then back to the university, and to provide the new solution and the ideas for the good solution toward the against such a problem. That is mechanisms education.
Wonderful.
For our side.
Linda, how would you improve the focus and relevance of education and universities to actually solve the issues that are very present in the economy and connect universities better with the need of the labor market?
That's a great question. And, I just recently came from meeting with a number of universities, and we were focusing in and around the curriculum that they have for cyber. And one of the really the big conversation and my goal for being there was to tell them that they're not turning the curriculum fast enough to where the education that, or the courses and the thoughts that they're really pushing to the students is relevant by the time they get out into industry. And so if we can really form these partnerships with the academic institutions, and them keeping really a pulse on what's not just going on out in the world, but what's going on and what's important to the companies and what's important to government, and kind of thinking about how do they retool their curriculum to be more relevant, and how do they do it in a manner, and I apologize, my dog, how do they do it in a manner that is fast, that's going to be faster pace, that is going to, allow us to move at what we're seeing happening out there in industry. And I think that we have to revamp our academic institution thinking in order to be able to do that. And it's not just thinking about the researchers from hundreds of years ago. Our students and our young people are wanting more expedient things to be pushed out now, right? So their temperance for these things taking a long time is less and less and less.
Mait, I would like to get your ideas on this. I mean, how do you see the system in Estonia where the university, we still have a lot of traditional universities who have traditional approaches to traditional education. How far is it from the actual needs of the economy of society? And are there actually risks in changing it with a rapid pace?
I think that there are always right now and in the future there will be always demand for fundamental research. So there will be also demand for traditional universities, no doubt about it. But still, society also needs and requires more practical, applied approaches, and universities of applied sciences can provide it. For instance, in Estonia, the level of applied research right now is at 25% of the whole research what is done here in Estonia is applied research. But it should be actually much higher.
What's the good balance?
What's the good balance? For instance, we like to compare ourselves to other European countries, and in some countries it's at 30 or at the 40 level. 40% of whole research goes to the applied research. Of course, the balance is kind of changing. At one point of time, there might be more demand for applied research, and at another point of time, there might be more demand for fundamental research. So definitely there should be some applied research. And I think that the Estonian problem is, if I could call it problem, is that it used to be so that in the past, in a history, the balance was, it didn't favor the applied research at all. The level was much lower, and it was so for a long time until someone realized that we need to support also companies. Companies need applied research to develop their products further, and then they started to increase it. Increase the level of funds what goes to the applied research. But we still have some things to do before we reach to the expected level.
It would be very interesting to hear from Daisuke, Olga and Linda the balance of applied research and the role of fundamental science in fostering innovation. I mean, we're living in a rapidly changing world where paradigms are shifting dramatically. Now, what is a good balance to approach this in a future-proof way? How do you measure the right balance of fundamental science versus applied science? Maybe we can start with Daisuke, who joins us from Japan, which is an innovation hub.
Yeah. So actually, in Japan, we focus on such fundamental, the pure science side. Almost all, the university guys, focus emphasis with such a pure science, so the fundamental research. But now it's time to change, I suppose. because especially for the local university and the Kanazawa University, we try to shift from the not only the fundamental research but also the such applied science. That's why the portion is increasing the number of such applied because of the the situation. First of all, we try to the very big linkage all over the world. We try to utilize any type of the knowledge, the first of all, and also the artificial intelligence also. That is also that we are they can support our the idea of the researching. So that's why I suppose the game already changed. Okay, so we try to set up such a new that we try to find and discover what is a problem or challenge in the world or in societies, and then to back to the university. That is most important function so far.
I'd
So
like
that's
to,
why
I'd like
we are
to
the
put the
gateway.
same
Yeah.
question for Olga and Linda. Where do you see the proper balance? How much do we need fundamental science to really have a breakthrough in fundamental knowledge and possibly really disruptive innovation? And where do you see the role of applied science there to really feed the economy with constant new knowledge, new talent that will be quickly available for use? Who wants to start, Linda or Olga?
Linda.
Go ahead, Linda.
Well,
Olga was very kind.
I would say that it's not really about balance. It's about priorities and capitalizing on what mechanism is going to bring it the best for the moment, right? And so there are going to be times where you're going to see applied research is going to be much more applicable versus just the true science side. And so I think we have to think about it slightly different and not say that it's about balance. It is about bringing the right idea, the right thinking for the moment that we need. And I think we've seen this through the pandemic where we couldn't rely on slower research, right? We had to really leverage ideas and thoughts and research that had already been formulated. And I think people think, everything that's come out of COVID with the vaccines and whatnot was brand new research, but this was leveraging, thoughts and processes that we had already been doing in many different places and applying it to a new problem at speed. And so I think what we're going to see coming out of the pandemic is that it's going to cause us to really relook at what's the best way for us to leverage our research machine, the mechanism, and how do we do it faster? Faster, but still maintaining this level of safeness and really getting to market. And so I think there's going to be more to come on this, but I would say it's about priorities. It's not about balancing. It's about leveraging the priorities and what's applicable for where you need to be.
Olga, would you like to share your ideas on fundamental versus
Yeah.
applied science?
And I'm glad Linda went first because she set the scene for what I was about to say, and so mine is less out of context. For any of you that heard my presentation earlier today, I talked about decision making in context rather than based solely on data that can be taken out of context and aggregated and so on and so forth. And I think that's the same with research. So I absolutely agree with Linda. It's about priorities, and we need to be aware of, we as in universities and industry need to be aware of moving priorities and adjust accordingly. But the thing that I was going to add, which is why I think Linda set the scene quite nicely for me, is I talked about the Sheffield Hallam experience, about expanding our research reach, as it were, and therefore the kinds of opportunities that we were creating for research. And the things that really blocked us were partly the kinds of things that my colleague sat next to you was saying. In Estonia, in the traditional universities, there are ways you apply for funding from research bodies. There are boxes to be ticked. There's an inordinately long process to go through. That's one barrier that probably needs to change, be adapted. Again, like Linda says, we need to keep the rigor, but we do need to think about, do we need all the delays and all the hoops? The other thing is, from the point of industry, and particularly, like I say, the smaller companies, who were the ones we dealt with most in Sheffield, it's not a problem unique to them, is you talk to somebody who has an issue, who wants some research about it, and they talk to somebody in the university. What we then found, because Hallam is such a big university, that other parts of the organisation had a conversation with another part of the university, with another administrator. And so we were all in our little silos, building these lovely relationships. But when we actually changed our processes, because we were looking at that fundamentally anyway, we realised that actually we had 5 or 6 different strands of relationships in an organisation, looking at 5 or 6 different pieces of smaller pieces of innovation because of the way it was. And when we looked, we thought, well, we really ought to be discussing cross-faculty, cross-business, to look at the issues in entirety, because when you put 5 or 6 different opportunities together, you actually see a completely different picture, and it gives you a different, possibly, thrust to what the research should be, which would benefit the industry better and the university better. So there's a lot to be said about destroying silos or cutting through silos to get a more holistic picture of what kind of innovation is required. And I think that's something for both organisations and institutions to step up the game, I think.
Thank you, Olga. That actually takes us in a very organic way to one of the 3 big categories that we should try to grasp, and that is leadership and the role of the leaders to grasp this entirety of issues, of very complex issues, and blend them together, bring different parties to solve complex issues behind the table. Now, Mait, how have the expectations on leadership changed? It almost seems as we need a Renaissance genius to run a business these days. Is gut feeling enough, or what is the requirement?
Actually, they say that if you have more than 10,000 hours of experience in some certain field, which means that you have been in this field some 6 to 10 years, then you should start trusting your gut, because then you have you have passed and you have seen so many various situations, and you know what this or another situation or indicator from the outer world or from the colleague or from the partner institution might mean, whether you should react somehow to this, or whether it's a kind of something what you can turn to be opportunity, or whether it's the challenge for you. So that's for the gut feeling. But of course, I think that the main focus, if we speak about innovation and cooperation between universities and companies, then it's very important to realize that what is even more important than technical innovation is the teamwork and team. And when we speak about the teamwork and team, then of course we should start talking also about the leadership, because leadership is then the most important thing. And if you have a good leadership, if you have a good team, talented people, and they are rightly motivated, then I think that they can deal with any challenge what society or what the market might pose for them. So that would be the shortly then.
Daisuke, it does,
Yes.
from Estonia, looking at Japan, one might have created a stereotype of a traditionalist society. Now, I know you might have almost elected a female prime minister. They were short. I think there were two candidates, right? And they were quite short of votes eventually. But how has the question of leadership, the concept of leadership changed? The values that are expected from a good leader in Japan in the past, say, 5 years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, so it's time to change some concept of the leadership. Yeah, you're right. So far, the female prime minister candidates already appeared, and also but on the other side, I suppose it's very takes time to get the new leaders, especially seems like the U.S. or the EU countries, because Japan is much more the teamwork countries, right? So that's why rather than the leadership, so they try to how to get such the teamwork, the business. So that's why even though the such a relationship in the university and the company side, so we need to get such a how to collaborate with each others. Okay, so in this sense, so I suppose we need in Japan, so we get such a mutual understanding of both sides, the university side and the business side, and to understand how to create a new innovations from both sides. That's why the unfortunate so before inside, so the business side, they don't have any such ideas, and the university sides also there is not so much connection to the business side. So that's why it's time to change to collaborate with each other, and then to make some communities for the creating the for the another new innovations. Okay, so that is important. So that's why I suppose that so far the concept of leadership not so changed so far in Japan side. Yeah.
Linda, you've been on responsible posts in so many different fields. I mean, you've had the privilege to lead your fellow citizens in military, on the federal level, on the state level, now in the private sector. How has the expectations for leadership changed? Has good leadership been transformed? Have the expectations been transformed in the past years?
I do think that the expectation for leaders has transformed. The challenge is that, if you're in a very high visibility role as a leader in an organization, you can find yourself in the front page because of technology, right? So social media now plays a role and kind of transforms what we see in terms of, or what we think of leadership. And I think the challenge that we have is it's unforgiving, right? So if you make one mistake, it can be very unforgiving. And so leaders need to be very thoughtful. They need to really kind of consider not just the decision that they're going to make in the moment, but what are the effects that decision could have longer reaching, right, longer term. And I think it is, we have to instill or maybe reinstill or reinforce the need for critical decision-making, critical thinking, this whole thing of collaboration and communication as fundamentals that every leader needs to master. One of the things, excuse me, that I am really on this path of, when I talk about the culture of innovation, there also has to be this culture of leadership, because we always think of leadership as the person that is in the seat at the time. And then the rest of us, if we're not in that seat, we're like, well, we're not the leader and it's not our problem. And that is a failure. That's a failure on a follower's side, right? So what I want organizations, institutions, organizations, and really everyone to be thinking is, we're all leaders, leaders and leadership is not about necessarily the role that you're in. It is about behaviors, it's about thinking, and it's about how we, choose to make a decision, decide, or act. And so we have to start bringing in those perspectives to, I think, before we're going to start seeing, more and more leaders kind of step into what I would consider to be their newness, right? And so people look at, all the different positions that I've had, and what I would say is there's a lot of those situations in the past that has prepared me that, I couldn't forget about, being this little girl from the country, or, not necessarily, being homeless. All of those things played into how I have been able to grow as a leader. And just because I've had all of those positions doesn't mean that I can't continue to grow as a leader in the future. And I think that's another thing that we have to be thinking about, is leadership is about this thing of perpetual growth and education. I'm always thinking about ways of increasing that, and how do I level up. And one of the things that we actually posted on social media yesterday, which I think is it's very applicable for this, and I just really like to challenge people. And it's a quote that I put out there, and it's, if you take the same path every day, it keeps things familiar. But if you take a new path, that creates growth. And for leaders, if you want to grow, don't follow the same path every single day. Don't follow the same path that someone before you necessarily has done. Think about, looking at that path and say, how do I now create a new and different path, a new connective piece that's going to allow me to grow?
Great ideas there. Olga, I'm wondering, because leadership means decisions. Decisions can come from your gut feeling, as Mait explained. 6 to 8 years, 10,000 hours. What was the right numbers? Yeah, 6 to 8 years, right?
10,000 hours.
10,000 hours in one field. You develop that gut feeling, but data, I guess, still plays a relevant role. We should be able to take decisions based on facts. Now, you were critical about big data. I'm just wondering, what steps should we really take to remove the barriers of innovation that big data can provide us with? I mean, and what is the role of universities in this process?
I hadn't thought I was critical. I thought I was just opening up thoughts of maybe we can use data differently. What are the roles of leadership? I think you're absolutely right that data does play a huge role in decision making. And what I was really trying to get across or one of the things I was trying to get across in my presentation earlier was that it depends what data you get as to how you make your decisions. So it's important for organisations as a general thing, but for specific leaders specifically, it's important to know what data you're having and do you have everything. So one of the benefits, the huge benefits of big data used properly, is that you no longer have a data set that's been collected at random that may or may not be representative. If you have a complete data set, you are making a fully informed decision without maybe things coming in from left field or right field, or things that you've missed because that data wasn't fully representative. So data can be used in that way to benefit organisations and leaders in their levels of success. But I think experience and gut feel are absolutely critical. Having said that, the other thing that's important, and this is where somehow leadership has changed how we perceive leaders, and as Linda rightly said, if we're not in a leadership position, then we are followers, and actually we can lead the situation as followers. If you like, I'm getting lost in terminology now, but if we're good followers, that makes the leader's role easier. But certainly in Britain, we've moved over the last few decades from a command and control leadership to, there are all kinds of phrases and all kinds of leadership research about transformational leadership, transactional leadership, all that kind of stuff. But actually, the people we admire most as leaders, I think, and you know, I've talked to many organisations, many people within them, are people who inspire us to be the best that we can. And whether we've got a junior leadership role or a senior leadership role, if we're the best that we can be, then it goes back to what Dyke was saying about we're motivated. So if, as a leader, I can make people feel good about themselves and what they do in their job, and if I can encourage them to have curiosity and to pick at a problem rather than be pressurized to come up with a solution instantly. Again, it goes back to what I was saying in my presentation. We need to give people time to ponder, maybe to make mistakes, but just to pick at ideas. And through picking at something, you get an idea that actually can change the direction that you were going to take, but it has shortcutted a solution, if you like, to a solution. So I'll give you an example. Many years ago, we were working on a project, and actually, Johannes, it's in the paper that I based my talk on. This organisation wanted to work out how they could have a relationship with remote customers. You know, online, it was a digital business, and you haven't got the benefit of seeing the customer walk through the door, look them up and down and think, can they afford £1 million ring, or do we sell them the little $2 thing that's down the, you know, just available that looks all right. You can't get this sense of the customer. And this particular chap was musing one day and was thinking, what do we have? And actually, he decided that they had a lot of things that about the customer if they really wanted to look about digital insights. So they worked out, they gathered all the data they had, they worked out that they knew what kind of device customers went on, they knew the time they went on, they knew what kind of operating system. And actually, when they followed through on those people through the connectivity that data can give you, they realised that their customers fell into three kinds. They bought traditional things, and this is, you know, a really, I found it an interesting example. So customers who used Google Chrome or Safari tended to buy much more modern items and had a much bigger spend. Customers who used Edge were middle of the road, and customers who used Mozilla Firefox and a computer bought the most traditional and had the lowest spend. And the Google Chrome users and the iOS users tended to use tablets or smartphones. And so all of a sudden they got this profile without knowing anything about the customer, because somebody gave that individual time to think about what they had without pressurizing them, say, tell me what we know about our customers. You know, they just approached the problem in a different way and used a bit of different time. And I think that the way we're all pressured and targeted, I think it's a brave leader who says, forget your target, but just have a think about that.
When we talk about innovation, we can't really escape capital. As we started our discussion today, many small and medium-sized companies just don't bother working with R&D because they don't have the means, they don't have the funds. Mait, access to capital, should we get more support from the government? I think, well, the answer clearly is yes. Definitely. But is that a gap that needs to be filled? And should we have this conversation about? Well, because you know we have this Just Transition Fund, we have this new ambitious green policy now in the EU. So, and a lot of ambition for the EU to develop technological competencies that we maybe didn't have before. So what's the role of the state? What's the role of the state providing capital in innovation?
Yeah, of course, there are so many ways how to get capital. If we start talking about the startups, then they have completely different possibilities how they get funded, starting from friends, fools, and family, and ending up with angel investors and going to the stock market by doing IPO. But if we come to the kind of ordinary SME, then I think that they should definitely have more possibilities how to get funded, because if your business is quite fragile, and usual length or age of the company doesn't reach more than 15 years when they go to the bankruptcy or when the owner decides to end up or sell the company away. So if we take it from this perspective, that usually they are not very rich, they don't have a huge turnovers, they don't have much funds to invest, so they definitely need some additional support to get the next level. And history has shown that some other countries, the governmental support, so-called the triple helix system, is one of the key here what can be used. What I mean by that is that if the company, for instance, want to do some innovation and it turns to the university to cooperate, and then there is always the funding issue, who is going to fund it. And in United States, in the mid of the last century, and in many European countries, there are certain mechanisms how government supports this type of cooperations. So the small companies could also develop new products and to enter to the new markets, and they have a different monetary systems for that. In Estonia, this is still under development. In a few years ago, they wanted to establish so-called unit which would provide money for university and companies' cooperation, but it turned out to be this way, that the companies can apply money from this unit, but they doesn't have to do necessarily cooperation with universities. If they think that they have enough strength to do it on their own or together with some another company, then they can do it. But now the latest news are that they still plan to do some kind of institutions similar to the Finnish VTT. If some of you are aware of it, and the VTT is also kind of governmental level, the institution what takes care of the technology transfer from universities to companies. So it's not enough right now, and actually I think that even if it comes to the market, this possibility, then it may take quite a while or sometimes when companies start to understand and realize and apply from these funds, because right now they might not be so innovation oriented as they should be.
Daisuke, how's the situation in Japan? Do universities and companies have to rely on their own finances to foster innovation and to create those re-startups that you were describing, or do you have public funds available to support this type of innovation?
Yeah, actually, I worked for the government at the time. I spent much money to support such SMEs for the startup or startup companies. But sometimes it fails because of some moral hazard that happens. Okay, so that's why even though spending much money, it's quite difficult. Rather than the financing, of course, finance is of course important, but adding to the finance, so we need some the facilitators or some person who can handling and some supporting with hands-on for each project. So that's why from my side, so I provided such the system, the ecosystem from university side, dispatching the student, collaborate with the researcher, and to support the each SMEs. Otherwise, it's quite difficult to survive for such a least startup projects. So that's why. So one side is the finance is important, but the person who can breach for the new innovations or startup system. And of course, the Japanese government, I already mentioned that, so they are much fund is happening already set up and to support for the SMEs and to restart up the business. But I suppose without any such the ecosystem, especially for the persons, human beings. So otherwise, it's quite difficult, the materialize the good, the restart up system, I suppose.
Of course,
Yes.
we have here in Estonia, I have to mention we have this governmental institution called Enterprise Estonia. They, of course, have funds what they can and should share with the companies, but what concerns the innovation, then Estonian companies are not very eager to apply it because the requirements are so that it's not so easy to do it.
Linda, I'm wondering if in the US you also consider public money necessary to foster innovation, because from Europe we see as the US as the most competitive environment where, I mean, everyone needs to have an idea ready, developed, and then when they get to the market, they will either live or die. How's the reality?
Well, I think it is extremely important, and it's a huge piece of our ecosystem here when you look at just the research side, the development side, and how we look at tech transfer and commercialization. But I would say that institutions shouldn't rely on that solely. They need to use the same mechanisms, and maybe this is more US based than it is other places, but they need to use the same mechanisms that they use to raise money for the institution and some of their foundations to be able to also fund this level of research and innovation and putting back in. And at Towson University, we see that very strongly, that our benefactors and organizations and companies are investing, especially in some of our innovation centers, and they're saying this is a place for us to partner not only with the academic institution, but it's also a place where we can go and collaborate to find new talent. And so I think we shouldn't look at it as in solely, the public side is providing the funding. I think we have to change that paradigm and look at how do we start using the same thought process that an entrepreneur, a startup would use really in looking for funding. So how do you start going to, that base? So for academic institutions, looking at, people who have graduated, right? Alumni and people who have been affiliated. So starting kind of that friends and family pool and getting them to donate to be able to spur this whole thing of innovation. So I think we have to change our perspective, and there's never enough money to go around, so we have to think of new ways to raise additional funds.
Great. Dear friends, we have about 5 minutes to wrap up the conversation, and I would like to come back to the first question, which is how do we foster innovation? How do we help universities and really businesses and organizations come together in a more effective way? And if I may ask each panelist to bring out one maybe concrete step that companies and universities can both make to really boost productivity and to take on the challenges that we have in a post-COVID world. So let's start with Olga.
Okay, I think my takeaway from all the research I've done, and of course we've all been impacted in how we've been able to do our jobs in the last 18 months. I think for me, it's very much, and I'm going to misquote, I think President Kennedy. What can we do for you? So if universities asked that of any organisation that they came into contact with, and if organisations didn't think universities are too slow and cumbersome for us, so I think if both parties had more open minds to, let's drop the, I'm not saying it's wrong, but let's drop the prejudice that we've got that universities are slow and cumbersome. And if universities could drop the prejudice that organisations want things too quickly and they're not interested in rigor and process, and that's all important to us. If we just were more open towards each other, we might be able to pool resources more readily than we do. I think it's happening slowly. We're coming together. But I think, going back to what Linda was saying about, we could do it more at pace if we were a little bit more open towards each other's different ways of working.
Thank you very much, Olga. Daisuke, how can universities provide the best support to increase effectiveness of the organizations working and developing the economy?
Yeah. So I already mentioned that. So I suppose it's very far away, the long distance between the university and the business, especially for such SMEs. So that's why don't you set up such the communities, especially for the community of the practice for the mutual understanding, or some getting the co-working or co-learning for the new innovations or the disruptive innovation. That is important facility. So that's why Kanazawa University already provide the lab system and also the company, right?
Linda, your good recommendation for universities and companies to foster innovation?
Well, definitely what Olga and Daisuke has already said. I would just add on, thinking of your institution as part of the community. You're not separate from, you're part of the community. And for companies and organizations, you need to embrace your institutions, right? Your academic institutions as part of your business community, part of your living community. And I think when we look at it as a whole, and opening up that perspective, that allows us to collaborate in very different ways.
Yeah.
And Mait, you can wrap up the conversation. What is your takeaway? What are the key steps that we need to take to really be ready for the new era?
I can mention the one what we have already started here in Estonia. Universities, they have mostly been taken as educational institutions, but we have tried to change this mindset, and we have started knocking to the doors of the companies and organizing various events by serving society in different various ways to let them know that we are not only the educational institution, but we can provide much more, that we can be partner in research and development, and we can partner in so many interesting things what can help companies to become better and prosper in future.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a wrap for the panel. Applause for all the panelists. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Dear friends, this also wraps up the conference. I hope you took with you some good ideas on how to build a virus-resistant company. Now, first of all, don't take memory sticks from strangers, because you might get your computer infected with a virus. The same goes for, of course, not downloading suspicious stuff from the web. But being virus resistant and looking into the future also means you need to foster innovation. And for that, I guess being open-minded is one of the success, certain ways to achieve success. But it's not always enough. I mean, you also need to know how to read your data. You need to have the proper algorithms. You need to have the knowledge on how to use those algorithms. But you can not only do with data, you also need gut feeling, as Emeka started the day with. Working remotely is not always the solution. It's not just the entrepreneurs, it's also the students who need to look each other in the eye and to have this personal contact in order not to lose themselves in the virtual reality. So I think these are some of the key takeaways, the key lessons that I learned during today. Thank you very much for being with us. It's been wonderful. I hope to see you in the next innovation conference. Thanks again.